Good afternoon and welcome to the Stormwater Program and Budget Workshop. I'm going to call it to order and turn it over to Mr. Merrill.
Yes, good afternoon, Commissioners. We are here to talk about stormwater and our stormwater program. Arguably, living in Florida, probably the most important, sustainable, resilient infrastructure that we depend on. And we unfortunately are underfunded in a lot of respects in this area. We're reliant on the general fund as well to help support costs. And so from two perspectives, one, to protect and enhance our transportation network, which is interlinked with stormwater, as well as to deal with neighborhood flooding and other issues. We are going to be showing you some scenarios that we believe will get us to a place where we're sustainable. It won't correct every single problem, but it will be a leap forward to making us more sustainable in our stormwater infrastructure. And so with that, I'll turn it over to John Lyons.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Lyons, the Transportation or Public Works Administrator. Today, as Mike indicated, we'll be going over the program, and we're really going to break this into three components. We want to give an overview of the existing program. We really want to talk about our sustainability plan as we move forward. And then the third topic will be to really talk about the funding mechanism and potential options that we look at as we go ahead. So today, we want to become fiscally sustainable, as Mike had mentioned. And so to do that, we have to have a system that is functional, and we want to reduce risk. And so to do that, we're going to look at these options. So about a year ago, we started a process to develop a business plan that not only, historically we've done stormwater master planning, which is really just a technical document that establishes a lot of flood conditions. It's used for the basis of development or infrastructure projects. And it also really just looked at the technical side of things. They're done incrementally. And so we also wanted to add a business component to it. So we brought on our team, we made our team bigger to include a couple of consultants that have expertise in this area. Public Resources Management Group, providing our financial support on rates and rate methodology, and Applied Sciences on providing engineering support, and of course our Public Works staff to jointly assimilate the complex information related to infrastructure condition, modeling, and maintenance needs. We established a vision to cultivate a sustainable and financially responsible stormwater management system, which includes the asset preservation and maintenance. We want to include green infrastructure in future projects or places where we can retrofit. We want to seek out and evaluate and implement innovative methods to improve stormwater quality, event management, and customer service. Additionally, we want to introduce the One Water approach, and this will get expanded on a little bit further once we get to the utilities workshop that will be coming in, I think, in June. And so really, it's an integrated way of thinking about the relationship of water to health, food, community, commerce, natural systems, and recreation. It's truly the basis of live, work, and play in our environment here in Florida. Our environmental team is leading efforts to foster innovation across the organization, cross-organizational collaboration. They routinely communicate with EPC. They're embedded within the utilities department. However, they provide service to all of us in supporting these efforts. We're currently working on the One Water initiative with the Planning Commission to incorporate these concepts into the comprehensive plan elements. Additionally, we've contracted with USF, Florida Center for Community Design and Research, which includes the colleges of health, architecture, and engineering, to provide assistance and strategies for inclusion of the Perils of Flood Act that we're required to integrate into our comprehensive plan by statute. Just yesterday, we were at USF for about 3 or 4 hours listening to some presentations of their initial phase of some of the work that they've been doing, looking at community vulnerability, coastal flooding areas, and also areas inland that flood as well. The county is comprised of 4 major drainage basin areas or larger watersheds, which include the Alafia, the Little Manatee, the Hillsborough River, and the Upper Tampa Bay. Within there are 17 watersheds which the surface water models are updated routinely. And we work collaboratively with SwiftMud in doing this. We typically receive grants to support those efforts as well. As you can see by this map, that not all the drainage that comes into Hillsborough County originates in Hillsborough County. We have contributing areas from Pasco County, from Polk County, and from Manatee County as well. And we do send a little bit of water outside the county. There is a little bit that goes through the Upper Tampa Bay over into Pinellas County as well. But we coordinate across not only the geography, but the municipalities and the political boundaries as well in doing this. The systems are complex. Its performance is a function of rainfall intensity and duration, drought or saturated conditions, tidal conditions along the coastal areas, maintenance or lack thereof, nature, a tree could fall and block a drainage system someplace that we don't know about, vegetation and siltation, and not all systems are public. We need to keep that in mind as well. There's a lot of the systems that are on private property, and we don't have maintenance rights to go in there and do work necessarily. Our stormwater system assets in the unincorporated area are comprised of over 1,300 miles of pipes, over 1,300 miles of ditches and channels, 41,000 drainage structures, which would be the curb inlets and other control structures, over 2,000 ponds. And some of those ponds are wholly owned by the county. There could be part of our CIP projects or capital projects, say along a roadway or a stormwater project. But they also could be stormwater ponds within neighborhoods that the homeowners association or the neighborhood has the underlying fee. They perform the new routine maintenance and mowing. But our stormwater system goes into that because usually those roadways and the stormwater systems are dedicated to the public, and those are our responsibility. So the whole drainage system incorporates these over 2,000 ponds. We also have 36 stormwater pump stations within our system as well, and that most likely will grow in coming years. From a revenue and expenditure perspective, in FY18 last year, our total budget's somewhere around $43.4 million as part of the Public Works budget. About 50% of that is made up from the current stormwater assessment that we receive. And Mike had mentioned that there's about $20 million of unincorporated general fund in supporting this program. And we get some money from grants that we get from SwiftMud as well, typically. We have had some from FEMA and from the Department of Environmental Protection in the past. The basis of the rates in the stormwater assessment, there's a single family home rate, there's a apartment condominium townhouse unit cost per unit, an ag property assessment, and that's only for ag properties that have improvements on them. So if you have just a farm field with no improvements, there's no stormwater assessment associated with that. And then commercial and industrial is rated at 3.5 cents per 1.5 square feet of impervious area. I think we tried to make the calculation as difficult as possible on that, but it's proportional to the amount of impervious area that's used on the residential. So on a per square foot basis on the equivalent residential unit, it's the same. Our annual workload is, last year we did over 50 miles of pipe cleaning. So we're cleaning things. We're repairing parts of the infrastructure as well. We're mowing. We have a lot of channels like Channel A, Channel G, Bullfrog Creek, and some of those areas around the county that we have responsibility to do mowing on. We're updating under the capital program. We're updating watershed studies. We have 5 that have been recently updated, and we have 12 studies underway. We're working with 58 different flood protection projects in design, various stages of doing that, and we're moving projects to construction as well. We also want to focus on the environment. We have compliance. We're mandated. Ahead of myself. So under federal regulations in the incorporated area, the county is the responsible party under the National Pollution discharge elimination system. It's the NPDES, as it's lovingly referred to. And we are the holder of the MS4 permit, which is a municipal system permit. So annually, we're required to do a certain number of inspections and sampling. We also have to have and implement a comprehensive stormwater management program. And so we do that. We file this report annually. Last year, we met 100% of the inspection requirements. We inspected over almost 10,000 of those assets that we spoke of earlier and inspected over 500 miles of ditch and pipe. We monitored about 512 different sites with 80 water bodies. We studied 43 for the health of the system with regard to water quality. We're looking at nutrient source tracking. We're doing things such as tree planting, street sweeping, rain gardens, and pollution prevention as well. There's a variety of programs that we're involved in. We collaborate routinely. We have staff that sit on the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Management Committee. We're active in that. We were participants in the Nitrogen Management Consortium. The Adopt-A-Bond program is an interesting program. If you're not aware of it, is that our staff works with neighborhoods and homeowners associations to where we'll go out and provide initial maintenance. We'll go out and help clean up a pond, provide plantings, work with the community in that area to educate them on maintenance requirements. And then at that point, we kind of give it over to them. They adopt it and they continue that maintenance effort under an agreement with us. So we invest some machinery, we invest some human resource and some plants in doing that. As a side note, we, through the Solid Waste Group, we're participants in the Keep Tampa Bay Beautiful organization as well. And there's a direct correlation to the amount of litter and things that go on within the solid waste system that have an impact on water quality as well and the environment. I spoke earlier of the One Water Initiative. We're also looking at green infrastructure, items that could be things such as rain gardens or bioswales. And so, you know, in some areas we do have swales adjacent to the road that we could put some additional planting in that could help with some of the water quality issues. We don't have much urban areas here out in the county per se, but there's opportunities to where between the curb and the sidewalk where there could be some stormwater facilities that could be planted. Project I could think of that's probably an eligible candidate would be out on Lumsden Road. Some of the stormwater system actually drains to an inverted median as opposed to the typical humped median that you see where trees are planted. We would encourage conservation as well, and we're also looking at potential aquifer recharge projects with the stormwater. So the sustainability plan is really a focus on how can we increase system performance, which is a combination of a variety of projects. So we want to increase, we have a demand for maintenance and flooding reduction. Seemingly the last 3 or 4 years, we've gone through a lot of wet summers, a couple of hurricanes, and the uptick in complaints and calls for maintenance has increased ever so much every year. A lot of the issues we have around the county are what I call pre-regulatory development. Older areas of the county, such as in Brandon or up in the town and country area that may have stormwater systems, may not have stormwater systems. They may be not designed to today's standards, and we need to really look to see what we can do to implement and mitigate projects that will help alleviate some of that. We also have aging infrastructure failures. So this map represents just basically the unincorporated area. These are the condition codes, red being poor, yellow fair, and green good of our pipes and structure systems within those assets that I mentioned earlier. Last year we had over 20 emergency repairs that we had to do on pipes underneath of roads typically, and spent about $3 million just on those repairs alone. And these are the service requests within our work order system just for 1 year, well over 3,000 stormwater service requests for, those could be through customer service, they could come through your offices, or they could be directly as part of a planned work program. The shame of this is that because we're in that reactionary mode, that, we're always playing catch up, and it has an impact on the efficiency of us to plan and implement just routine maintenance work. So, as the fire alarm gets pulled, we have to come off of a regular job and go off someplace else and react to that. And that's not the position we need to be in. So this slide outlines essentially what our current levels of maintenance are, and we kind of portrayed on an average cycle time. Some assets are going to need more attention than others on a more routine basis, but this is just kind of averaging that. And what we would like to do or propose is that we increase those levels of service to where we increase the cycles on working around the ponds, the inspections, pipe cleaning, which includes jet vacuuming, replacing old pipes in some cases. We have a lot of side drains in the rural areas, which are pipes under driveways. They get clogged up so the ditches don't flow, and it could be flooding the road or could flood property as well. Trash and debris removal, we find all kinds of things within the stormwater system, TVs, grocery carts, pretty much anything that anybody throws in a ditch will end up in the stormway system. Street sweeping as well. We also want to increase the amount of street sweeping. Currently, we are on a quarterly basis hitting most of our arterial and collector roads with curb and gutter. And within the residential areas, we're doing that once a year. And what we would like to do is increase that within the residential areas to 4 times a year. And that helps get some of the just debris, the normal road wear materials out of the gutters and out of the stormwater systems as well. In our asset management piece, this really indicates the average age of our assets by different categories. We have a significant part of the system is made out of metal pipes, the old corrugated metal pipe. We found areas in Sun City Center, which is pretty old, relatively speaking, I'm sure more than 40 years old, where basically the pipe is rusted out and left a void underneath the roadway. The roadway hasn't failed, but the void is still there. And so we really want to get on a cycle that we're replacing those pipes as soon as we can. They most likely will be replaced with concrete pipes, which have a longer lifetime. Within regard of the concrete pipe issues that we have, it could be that they were installed under different construction standards. New pipe today has gaskets in it, whereas the old pipe didn't. They're also wrapped with a filter material to keep sand from migrating through the joints into the pipe and creating those voids above the pipes and depressions in the road that we typically see. So in the asset preservation service levels, which really is tied to the capital program, we really want to look at funding and upgrading our pump stations so they're more functional. The pipe life cycle replacement we just spoke of. Neighborhood and intermediate and regional flood protection projects, that's a continuation of those areas that don't have adequate stormwater systems. They may be 30, 40-year-old neighborhoods, or areas in rural areas on the roadways that need some upgraded drainage systems to function more efficiently. We want to upgrade our regulatory compliance piece as well, and environmental protection and restoration. So we want to enhance some water quality projects. We'd like to invest more in that as well. Additionally, in hazard mitigation, let me step back onto the water quality piece. We've also had conversations with the utilities department on septic tank elimination or reduction programs as well. The enterprise fund can't pay for that. There may be a mechanism within part of the general funding of the stormwater program that could help assist in moving those programs ahead. In hazard mitigation, we have some areas with repetitive flooded structures and severely repetitively flooded structures that we typically run through a FEMA program that goes through the State Department of Emergency Management. It's a cumbersome process with limited funding. There may be opportunities, other communities have self-funded some of those programs or supplemented funding in some of those programs to make them move ahead a little bit. They're just a tedious, long process to do, to work on those type projects. So under our proposal this reflects the different categories, which is the pie chart broken into the various categories. And the increased funding levels, we're giving consideration to increase the funding levels in maintenance by about $12 million a year, and asset preservation, which would be primarily pipe replacements, trying to accelerate some of that backlog, of about $13.7 million, and an additional $12.7 million for flood protection projects, and starting to look at some of those regional type projects, as well as improved water quality efforts and some of the hazard mitigation opportunities. So going from a $43 million program to about an $82 million a year program. So we want to spend a little bit of time talking about how the revenue side of the equation is really formulated. So today's program was originally adopted in 1989. I think it was implemented in 1990, plus or minus on that. The methodology is effectively a one-size-fits-all on the residential side. There was a calculation done, and we can't find any records of how it was done, that basically established the average equivalent residential unit at about 1,800 square feet per residential lot. What we've discovered is, through some, being able to use GIS and some of the property appraisers' information, that's really probably closer to 4,000 square feet on average for an impervious area on a residential lot. So it currently funds capital and water quality, the $22 million that we spoke of earlier. Historically, we've been supplemented by general fund, community investment tax projects, and grants. Additionally, so that's kind of gone up and down over a period of years. When we had some issues back in the 2000s up around the university area, there was a lot of effort of CIT funds put into that area, as well as grants through the Department of Environmental Management, FEMA, and SwiftMud as well. So we want to talk about assessment options, and we want to look at an updated rate method, a full program cost recovery, which means transitioning away from general fund support and going to a self-supported program, and also talk about the increased levels of service in maintenance and capital as well. So the current method, as I mentioned, was based on an 1,800-foot average impervious area of the residential lot. The updated method is about a 4,200 square foot impervious area on a residential lot, and we're looking at tiering that. So we would have three sizes of assignment of properties based on a range of impervious areas calculated on that. And so there would be a small, medium, and large rate method associated with that. So under that new rate method, what we found was that the old system really had it understated what the residential impervious area was. And so the burdening was on the commercial side of the assessment based on the left side versus the right side. The top is the current method of what the estimated residential square footage is versus the measured commercial square footage. And on the updated method, by assigning it to the averages or the database, it shows that there was obviously more residential square footage that was unaccounted for. So the full program cost recovery would be looking at pulling all the general fund money over into a stormwater assessment. So we came up with this slide just to kind of work through that. It shows the current method for residential only at $42 per year, the number of households that are in each of the categories under the new system, and what it would be, the $42, how that would change if we applied just the tiering to that. So the smaller homes would actually see a reduction in the assessment. The medium homes would see an increase, and the larger homes would see a little bit larger increase in the assessment if nothing changed today, other than just re-tiering the program on the residential side. If we look at full cost recovery, that would be taking the $20 million of unincorporated money and distributing it between the commercial and the residential, and this would be the net impact of doing that method as well. Again, this is no increase in level of service whatsoever. This is as is, just a different funding mechanism. So if we throw in the additional maintenance and the additional capital, the medium size would go from a $57 assessment to about $193 assessment for full cost recovery, additional maintenance and additional capital. We get to that sustainable rate to be able to fix things. And it's reflected in each of those categories. On the commercial assessments, under the current assessment, if we do the rate equity method, which rebalances that cost per square foot of impervious area, this is what the impact would be of an existing property that's 15,000 and 20,000 square feet. So 8,000 would be probably your typical fast food restaurant. 15,000 would be the next level, retail store, a little bit bigger than that, and then 20,000 is just, I don't know what that typical would be, but it shows what the difference would be under a rate equity adjustment. Going to full cost recovery, it's not much change in some regard for those rates to do that. So that goes back to that whole kind of unbalance between the residential and the commercial. When we start adding in additional maintenance, the rate increases again, as is shown. And if we go to the sustainable rate showing the additional capital, that 8,000 square foot unit would go from about $187 to about $365 annually. So the assessment is on your tax bill. It's a non-ad valorem assessment that shows up on a tax bill. That's the way it's been. We have to go through a rate hearing every year. If we make changes to the rates, we have to notice everybody by mail, and so it's about 300,000 to 400,000 notices get sent out to property owners. And I'll bring Henry up, Henry Thomas with Public Resources Management Group, to really talk about the residential rate comparison with other municipalities as they do work around the state.
Thank you, John. As John indicated, my name is Henry Thomas. I'm a Senior Vice President with Public Resources Management Group. So John had asked me to share with you the data we'd collected on the stormwater fees being charged in other communities. And at the outset of this, I'd like to point out, though, that in interpreting this data, you have to be careful not to assume that every community is fully funding their stormwater costs, whether they're doing the right level of maintenance and capital investment, or whether the fee itself is fully funding, just as the situation the county finds itself in today, where your fee is $42, but your cost today is roughly double that, and it's being made up through the general fund. So when you look at all these circumstances, it does vary from community to community. I will say that, we've been working in Florida now for 25 years. Since 2017, we've done more stormwater rate studies than we did in the prior decade. So these issues have become prominent issues in communities throughout the state of Florida in terms of not only having the correct rate levels relative to the methodologies, we're revisiting that in a number of communities, as well as the funding needs going forward for a sustainable stormwater systems. I also would like to point out that this comparison includes some counties as well as municipalities. And one of the recommendations that we're making is for you to continue to use your non-ad valorem assessment method. And I will say that the reasoning behind that is that, if you look across the state and the stormwater utilities, you'll find that that counties predominantly do assessment methodology. Municipalities often have stormwater utilities where they put it on the monthly bill, but in the case of, for example, the city of Tampa, they actually do an annual assessment for both their maintenance and capital within that city. One of the biggest reasons why counties tend to focus on this billing methodology as non-ad valorem assessment is the ability to match a utility service and meter to a property, because stormwater fees are basically property-based. And if we don't have utility service at that property, we still want to assess them a stormwater charge. It becomes much more difficult for counties because they don't have that good match. Whereas a lot of Florida cities where you have fairly well built out communities, there's a pretty much a one-to-one match that is easier to develop. In addition, it's pretty straightforward to do the assessment in terms of the cost of managing the billing process. We would expect that if you went to a monthly billing approach, you'd probably invest more in that process than you do today, because now you pay a fee to the tax collector and he puts it on the bill for you. And alternatively, you would have to set up a billing process through your monthly utility bill, be prepared to answer questions year round, et cetera. So again, we think that also I will say this, over the last decade, we've seen a number of communities that have transitioned from monthly utility bill to annual non-ad valorem assessment. We don't see that reverse happening. So the conclusion of many communities is that it is a superior approach if you can put it on your non-ad valorem assessment.
Henry, I just want to interrupt. There's another reason you're going to see that some of what we're recommending will involve borrowing to start getting ahead of the curve here. From a bondholder point of view, an annual assessment on a tax bill is a much more secure credit because you can foreclose on property if they don't pay. If we went to a monthly billing, bondholders would likely expect us to put some other revenue behind it to support it because the collectability would be in question. So that's the other reason why.
Yes. So again, collectability being an important issue as well. So in this case, what you'll see here is the range of rates is across the map. It varies quite a bit. You'll note on there that we have in there the city of Tampa. That includes the two basins where they assess both capital and O&M. They have a citywide O&M renewal and replacement assessment, and then they've got in South Tampa 2 basins that have specific capital assessments, because that part of the city is very old, and they have most of their flooding problems occur in South Tampa. So they're addressing that, and because of the benefit rules related to assessments in general, they've chosen to assess only those basins that these improvements are being done in. In the county's case, when we're looking at regional projects in the future, those projects are going to be done you've got projects throughout the county that need to be developed over time. So again, one of the points I would also make is there are a number of communities here that have adopted rates. These are the current rates in place. And for example, Palm Coast, which is at the upper right-hand side at 187, they actually have an ordinance that they passed that will take that rate to over $240 a year over the next 5 years. So other communities that have looked at these rates, some of these rates, this is the current fiscal year and doesn't relate to possible increases in rates over time. The city of Miami Beach obviously has sea level rise issues as well, and that's why you see them way up there at the high end. But again, I'm working right now with a couple of counties and a major city here in Florida, and we're looking at significant rate increases because they too need to be doing more maintenance, more capital investment in the system to make it more resilient and sustainable. And so they're having to face the issue of funding, and we're going to be proposing those increases. Those aren't completed yet, but they're on the way. And I will tell you that over time, I think you're going to see a lot of communities increase their rates. We recently did one for Longwood, Florida, and the rate is now in Longwood and in Winter Park, Florida, where they have lots of water, lakes and such, are going to be over $144 a year. And that's the initial rate, and it will go up over time. So one of the things when you put these rates in place back in 1990, we haven't really adjusted those rates a lot over the years. And one of the things, obviously, going forward, you're going to want to be considerate of, I think, is that, you know, our costs go up every year, labor costs and such. And many communities have been reluctant to have annual increases in stormwater rates, and that's why they subsidize it through the general fund. But I think more and more are going to look at it more like a utility system. There's certainly a significant infrastructure there that needs taken care of, as significant as your other utility enterprises. So, but if you have any questions on this comparison, I'll be happy to try to answer them for you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Appreciate it. Mr. Lyons, you.
Couple more slides,
Okay.
please. So our recommendations is to incorporate the tiered residential method. That gets us back to an equity standpoint from the size of impervious area. Give consideration to full cost recovery on the general fund side, and also include the increased service level of maintenance, and also to get a sustainable capital funding level to be able to continue to replace pipes and implement other programs. From a scheduling standpoint, we're having the workshop here today. We need to set a public hearing because this is a tax bill assessment process. We would need to have that public hearing request on June 19th at the latest board meeting, and to be able to mail out all the advertisements that we have to take care of. It's a pretty tedious process to do that, and have the public hearing on August 7th tentatively, with the rates becoming effective on October 1st. That's all I have. Again, I'd like to thank my staff, along with our consultants, Henry and Elia Raj from Applied Sciences, and all the work that's been put into this, and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Thank you. Now moving to board discussion. Commissioner White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know it's been a long day, but I do have a lot of questions. My county commission district is the largest geographically speaking, and stormwater issues make up a high percentage of our constituent work, and they tend to be the most complex issues as well. So I'm going to have a host of questions for the consultant, Mr. Lyons, and maybe even Mr. Helvenston. I see him back there. But I'm going to start with Mr. Thomas, if you would be so kind. Now, I'm going to offer a caveat with the question that I'm about to ask, in that I'm not asking the level of difficulty in doing this, but just whether or not it can be done, period. Is it possible to design a stormwater fee such that you don't have a standard rate around the county? Can you base the rates on things like elevation and soil type for an area, or even densities in an area?
Theoretically, things of that nature do go into your overall cost structure. So I wouldn't say that technically, yes, you could do that. And obviously, when we look at impervious area, there's runoffs. Soil types do affect the amount of runoff. So, you know, the impervious area method that you've been using for many, many years is the most common method used out there. 80% of the stormwater utilities do it. But could you vary it? But again, that becomes a very complex issue, particularly as you raised soil types, because that can vary a great deal within smaller parts of the community.
Sure.
That would take a lot of work to assess.
So just a couple of high-level things that are on my mind here. Of course, I'm not an engineer, but my gut tells me that we're missing a piece of the equation. So we showed the small, the medium, the large-sized home and how much impervious area they have. Well, you know, that 4,000 some odd square feet of impervious area, you know, that has a different impact on that impervious area on a 5-acre lot versus 20 of those being on 5 acres. Are we taking that into account at all? Because it seems to me like a large rural tract is not going to have as much of a stormwater impact, and I'm just having trouble wrapping my head around frankly, why they would pay the same fee as someone in a suburban area or an urban area. And also, and I'm just being frank here, you know, some people build in not the best of areas from a stormwater perspective. So again, I mean, it really begs the question of, you know, why does someone that went out of their way to build in an area that's high and dry and isn't going to have significant stormwater issues, why are we talking about raising their rates as much as we are, you know, versus someone that, you know, frankly should have known that they're building in an area that's prone to flooding and stormwater issues. So, look, I'm not going to try to kid anybody and say that I think this would be easy and that you would just flip a switch. I know it would be incredibly complex, but I mean, is that something that we could explore?
So let me address that.
Okay.
There are a number of rate methods that are used out there in practice. And when we publish a report for you, we'll share some of these details with you that you can study before you have to make your final decisions.
Okay.
But when we look at the impervious area issue as it relates to acreage, okay? Intuitively, you say, well, if it's a bigger property, it captures more of the stormwater. But, and I'm not an engineer either. My background is finance and economics. But the engineers I work with in this area tell me that even undeveloped land has runoff. So if we took two properties, one was a 4,000 square foot residential impervious area situation on an acre lot, and the other was on a 5-acre lot, you can actually expect more runoff to come off that 5-acre property than the 1-acre property.
Depending on soil type and things like
Yes,
that.
sir. Yes, sir.
Right.
And what the kind of the number that I see commonly used for pervious areas is like 20%. So the science says that, you know, notwithstanding the soil type differences, that generally undeveloped property runs off at about 20% of the rate of a pervious area. So when you look at these methods, there's some folks just charge per parcel. We actually have a few in the state that every parcel pays the same. Now, you know, that doesn't work out real well when you're charging a residential property the same as you're charging, say, a large packing house with huge parking lots. That's not deemed to be that fair. Obviously, total area of the lot. Some use that method. The impervious area, I said, is used about 80% of the time in practice. There are a few communities, City of Orlando is one, that they measure every residential property, both pervious and impervious, and every commercial property, both pervious and impervious. And they have a very complicated algorithm, and it does take them a lot of work to maintain this. So there are a few out there. We, in looking at, in general, the methods that were available, we tended to say, let's stick with the pervious area. We're already doing the measurements. We've got the commercial data. It's going to be straightforward to implement, but then throw in the tiering so that the smaller homes, some of these increases we're talking about, if you were to adopt them, would be mitigated for the smaller homes. So again, I think that while the size of the lot matters, it's actually, you know, all other things being equal on soil types, it actually contributes to runoff. And I know, to me, that's not intuitive, but that's the science of it. And even if you're high, keep in mind, once the water leaves the property, you may be at a high place, but once the water leaves the property, it still has to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. And the stormwater system that the county maintains is really the interstate state highway system, if you will. It's the big thoroughfares. It's the pipes and drains that take the water from the individual neighborhoods through the watersheds to its ultimate destination. The water's going somewhere. So, you know, I've never seen a rate out there, and I'm not aware of any that take into account elevation. And again, I think, you know, the presumption of most communities is they would rather have a single rate and deal with the fact that it's not perfect, but it's reasonable.
We did talk about the coastal aspect of it quite a bit, and you kind of get to a place where, you know, we recognize we spend, it's kind of like the tail wagging the dog. So we spend a lot of resources dealing with a small number of properties that are in high coastal areas where we know there's, and it's just repetitive. You keep going back and doing the same thing over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so the property insurance industry has kind of come to the realization that those folks need to pay a premium. Now then you get to a public policy issue as well. So they were allowed to build there at some point. Is that their fault?
Yeah.
So then you look at it prospectively. If we're going to allow people in the future to build in areas that we know are going to flood and cost us more money, maybe their fee should include a premium. It's a choice, you know.
I know you're going to be looking for consensus from the entire board, obviously, but, you know, I would like to explore that, Mike. And I don't remember the county or municipality that you said has the sort of complicated algorithm, if you will.
City of Orlando.
City of Orlando. I would love to see staff look into the City of Orlando model, even though it sounds a bit complex. Okay, I think that answers those questions. I would like to ask John Lyons a couple of questions.
I am an engineer, and I can add to the last conversation a little bit.
I know you are, and you're always very helpful when we talk about those things.
So when the modeling is done under the stormwater system, it's typically done what they call an antecedent moisture condition of 3, which means the soils are saturated. We're trying to look at the worst conditions, so we're not too conservative in estimating those in stormwater modeling.
Excellent. Now, our stormwater system consists of natural systems and man-made systems, right?
Yes, sir.
And this may be a land use question, it may be a county attorney's office question, I'm not sure, but when a development is approved and they're required to have certain stormwater infrastructure, mm-hmm. What ultimately determines whether or not that, in the end, whether or not that man-made infrastructure is privatized versus put into the public arena?
So it's there's probably a couple of permutations of that. So for example, if a subdivision remains private, a development remains private, or a commercial development is an example as well, the systems on that property are typically maintained by that property owner. So on a commercial strip mall, a mall, any of those things.
I just want to stop you there because that kind of gets me to the root of what is so frustrating in dealing with these stormwater issues on the constituent services front. We are told so many times that's a private system. We can't step foot on there and clean it or modify it or whatever needs to be done. I mean, is it legal to stake out a position, you know, in the land development code or the comp plan or through any other means to say that all stormwater systems from here forward are going to be public?
So,
or at least that an easement of some kind is granted?
So in the situation of that, if anything's been built in, I'm going to say recent times, they're going to have to apply for a permit through the Water Management District. And the Water Management District would have that enforcement capability on those type of properties.
Is there any way to gain easements on those older properties looking forward through any kind of a mechanism?
Ed Helvinson with the County Attorney's Office. I mean, the county always has the option of going back and trying to acquire an easement from anybody, but I think John's answered that the issue is primarily historical. A lot of the older systems are private systems. Most of the newer systems have been accepted by the county and are being maintained by the county, and that, I think that's the basic divergence there.
Right, and the point of frustration is the older systems, I think, tend to cause the most problems, either with respect to how they're designed or aging infrastructure.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I'm getting into the technical aspects a little bit, but I think that goes hand in hand with, you know, asking to change this fee structure.
Oh, no, that's a huge question. So that, I can't remember what year it was, or we had so much rain. It was the 100-year flood thing.
2015.
Yeah, I mean, most
August.
of the service, yeah, August, you remember?
You remember?
You got the date and time?
It's encoded in your genes. Huh?
Yes.
A lot of the constituent calls were a result of systems on private property we couldn't get to that weren't being maintained, that then they had an influence on property around them because water had to go somewhere. And we were literally stuck because we couldn't just take the initiative and march onto the property and fix it. So, I mean, unless there's some change in law at the state level, because it's a property rights issue.
Yeah.
We can and should continue to try and negotiate easements with everybody we can, just on a voluntary basis. What usually happens is people aren't so concerned about it when it's sunny and raining,
Right.
but then they're screaming at us when it's bad. So it's kind of like an action by this board maybe to somehow reinforce that need to have these easements would be huge.
Okay, I'd like to work with staff on maybe, how that would take shape as a commissioner item or a staff item, or however we'd want to bring it forward at a board meeting. Final question, Mr. Chairman, I promise. John, I jotted down 2 page numbers, and I don't remember which is which. I think it's 14 though on your presentation.
Okay.
I have 14 and 21 jotted down, but I think 14 gets me to my final question.
This one. This is the maintenance level of service.
Yes. So when you look at these, the systems on the left under the asset column, clearly not all of these would be imposed upon developers at time of development, but some would, such as pond systems, right?
Yes.
So clearly, what service level we build it to is a policy decision, right?
Yes, I believe it would be a funding scenario and policy decision on our part. And just to clarify this, this is kind of an average generic type statement. It goes into, depending on where it is and what the situation is, you may have a ditch or a canal that needs a lot more maintenance than something else. It may have, we have cases where property owners, do a really good job of mowing and clearing debris and doing all that. And you have other cases where it's, it's in its natural state for many years.
So my question's probably a conversation for another day, but would staff be willing to bring a report to a board meeting that touches on our stormwater at a high level for the board, what our stormwater technical manual would require in terms of the year cycle, if you will, that we're requiring folks to build to?
Yep.
In terms of stormwater infrastructure?
Absolutely, Commissioners, we can do that. Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
So you are looking specifically, though, for the requirements in the Stormwater Technical Manual that private development is required to adhere to upon
Do they have to adhere
construction.
to a 20-year cycle, 50-year cycle, whatever the case may be? Maybe it's different for different systems, but I'd love to have a board discussion on that.
We can do that.
Okay,
And I
great.
think there's 2 components of that. One would be design criteria. The second would be maintenance criteria that would be expected.
I'd like to see both.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you. A very interesting report. I heard several things that I was curious about. You had indicated that the situation with acquiring grants from FEMA is quite challenging. I believe I got that impression. Let's just put it that way.
Yes, on the repetitive flooded structures.
Is that the flood mitigation assistance grant?
Yes, that's what we'd be speaking of.
Okay, all right. And have we been successful to date?
We have been successful. I think that's in the eye of the beholder a little bit. We have some property owners that it's, I think the quickest process that I'm aware of has been maybe 3 to 4 years. And we've had some that have been extended over 10 years in getting there. And part of the challenge is it's not a fully funded program at the federal and state level, so it's a competitive process. There's a financial limitation. on how much, so as an example, we're going through a property right now where the maximum structure contribution would be $150,000. And there's some additional funding that the state/feds would provide for engineering, some other work, and then the property owner has to contribute as well. And so, you know, anytime we make a change to the form of the grant application, it has to go back up through the state. It typically comes before you all and goes back up through the state. It's just, I don't think it's a real value-added program, in my opinion. Some states, I think we're looking at options to where can we supplement it. Could it be a self-funded program where we buy the property at a fair market value and just turn it into green space, so it's no longer developed on.
Okay, because I was just curious how much we as the county are using it for our projects versus having private entities apply for that grant. I mean, we have a significant amount of capital expense that we're looking to do. I was curious if what percentage of that would be possible to get grant resources for any of that capital expense, in addition to borrowing money to make it happen.
So outside the repetitive flooded structures, we typically work with SwiftMud and compete with everybody else for those local funded projects. So we're using them. We're pretty steady on getting money on the stormwater modeling piece of it, and we've been very successful on a lot of projects. As an example, we've got a project at 56th and Hannah that we're working on, an area that's flooded repeatedly. So we're working with, and we've received, I think, 50% of the funding to make an improvement there very shortly. So we continue to pursue those. I think part of the challenge is being able to, you know, it takes a while to catch up once the funding increases to be able to do the studies, do design work on the projects to get them moving forward. So that's kind of the situation we're in.
Yeah,
We
I'm
continue to pursue that.
I'm
Yes.
sure it doesn't help when the government decides to shut down. It probably makes it a little more difficult sometimes. I'm curious, I've got a couple of other questions as it relates to residential versus commercial. You know, in the city of Tampa, when they were addressing their stormwater, they had all kinds of opportunities to help a property owner mitigate some level of the expense. For example, they were a good neighbor or a bad neighbor when it came to stormwater, either retention. For example, they have a retention pond credit that they offer for, I assume, residential as well as maybe commercial. But with that in mind, how much flexibility would we incorporate in any part of this rate increase as it pertains to not only retention pond availability, where if they're being good neighbors and they're not creating a problem with that, not maintaining it, but other things that we have on our goal list also come to mind. We're looking to increase density in order to reduce overall urban sprawl costs, which actually puts more houses closer together, but maybe more in a grid fashion that creates more drain opportunity, or spreading it out, or more pathways, tiny homes, any one of those things that come to play, especially when we're investing in redoing our roads to facilitate transit, but also to address congestion and the overall maintenance we have to do anyway.
Sure.
I would imagine flood problems actually causes a great deal of deleterious effect on our roadways to begin with, because usually the reason we find that we've got a gigantic potholes because we had a flood that week.
Yes.
But some of our methodology, whether it be commercial or residential, there seems to be a real difference in the cost, and I was trying to, one, understand that, but two, you know, as we are growing or building communities and working with home builders that are trying to create some density, how does that play a part in what we're doing here on the assessment?
So the first question, I'll let Lucia speak to the second.
Okay.
The first question is that the base rate is based on impervious areas. So on the commercial properties, it's measured out. I think you'd ask a little bit earlier on was that talking about the credit piece on a stormwater system or on somebody having a retention pond, really, we're looking at that in total, that spine network of the system in addition to the neighborhoods. And so a lot of the money, I think Henry mentioned this, was getting distributed to the overall system. The folks that live in those neighborhoods or have those properties are driving on all the same roads that everybody else is. So it's kind of just that general principle of maintenance needs across the county or infrastructure needs, if that helps.
Yeah, that does. But would we be willing to consider, for example, higher rates in areas that are, historically high-level floodplains? Like on our shores, on our riverfronts. I mean, they are clearly an area where, even if they take the risk to have their house flooded, they'll rebuild the house because they're willing to negotiate with an insurance company to rebuild the house. Whereas we still have to actually maintain the roads to those areas that, as I think Commissioner White was trying to allude to, shouldn't be building houses there in the first place.
Well, I think that they have more than 50% damage to the value of their home. They're required to elevate above the floodplain in that area on the property. So that's part of.
You mean after it's been damaged?
After it's been damaged. If there's
But we're
more
not going to charge a higher rate for an area that we already know is at risk when they're choosing to build there?
Yeah, so that kind of gets back to what I was talking about before. You can apply that beyond coastal because, and we had this discussion, so someone can build their property on stilts and it protects their home. The problem is all the infrastructure we have to put in extra to get to them is a burden then that everyone else has to bear because they have the selfish interest that they want to be where they are. I would say one public policy solution is, it's the incentive and disincentive. You can build anywhere you want, but if you're going to build somewhere where it's going to cost everyone else more, you're going to be charged a premium on top of an increased stormwater charge.
Yeah, if you're in the A area, A zone, you've moved into an area you know is going to flood.
So we're not affecting someone's property right to build where they want to, but it recognizes the full cost of having to put all kinds of our resources in to clean up the mess for their property, even though their property may be fine because it's up on stilts. It's like, there's a dissonance there that just doesn't work. So,
thank you.
Mr. Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. To the point just made, I saw a webinar. I think it was 1,000 Friends of Florida. It was a legal webinar, and they showed a place on the east coast of Florida where the neighborhood had been destroyed, but I think it was Florida. And they were rebuilding parts of it, but there was a road going through it that was totally broken up and destroyed. And then they were talking about the public policy part of it, how the government had to pay to rebuild the road, and more than that, obviously. But I think I would very much support charging a premium or working out in terms of public policy how we do that if a person chooses to elevate or chooses to. I just think that it's fine to live where you want, but you need to be able to pay the cost of that infrastructure. It shouldn't be everybody else's burden to subsidize. I want to thank you for the excellent presentation. I've learned a lot. I can hardly even, it's so much stuff that I'm having trouble processing through, and I appreciate all the questions that were asked, because those are helping to, I think, understand and grasp this a little more fully. One thing I have to say, my knowing nothing about this is I was just a little taken aback. I had no idea. This is for Mr. Lyons. So the ditches with the trash and debris, clean, mow, spray to maintain flow, existing service level is every 20 years is what we do for any one person's ditch outside their home?
That's probably an average of just of all those things combined. We mow more often than that, but some areas may get mowed a couple times a year. Some may be more often than that. And it depends too. You go in some areas, folks are taking care of it all the way out to the edge of the pavement. So it's a combination of all those things, but we'd like to increase the cycle on that, definitely.
And before this presentation, I was I hadn't even come to this page yet, and wrote a note to myself to ask. I didn't know this was going to be here, and I was going to my question was going to be if they're maintained annually. So I was just a little bit off in my expectation, and so I'm a little surprised actually by that cycle. It seems even if you do other interim kinds of maintenance.
That probably could have been split out a little bit different, but we probably don't go to some roads and pick up debris that often. You know, we just don't go there.
I'm just wondering if so is that like, I know your sustainable service level is 15 years. Is it 15 years on that good enough?
Well, yes, I think it is in that, I'm not a big fan of these cycles based on years. It goes back into some things need more attention than others. It could be that, we're basing this on how we're issuing the work orders, and it goes to that we're not touching some areas because somebody else is doing the work for us. So that plays into the overall average as well.
And I realize you're doing kind of gross overviews
Yes.
here. The other thing is just about metal pipes. Are we still doing that versus concrete?
We are putting in some corrugated metal pipes. Typically, those are going to be underneath driveways in rural areas. We're definitely not putting them in anywhere where there's brackish or salt water. I think we know better than that. But they're a good product. They're easy to handle. The difference is that a small crew could go fix a driveway pipe versus when we get into the concrete pipe, we're going to need different equipment to lift it and install it as well.
So, as we've seen with climate change and not just sea level rise, but unprecedented, and who knows, 2015 might have been one of them, kind of unprecedented storm events across the country in places where they just have storms that were unrecorded prior to this, where they have just intense rainfall for hours or days that accumulate so quickly that the system couldn't handle it. I've been, not just for sea level rise, but for those kinds of impacts that are apparently occurring, extraordinarily concerned about our stormwater infrastructure. And I'm really pleased to understand it better and see this. Because of the kinds of things I've seen over the last 2 years about our fee structures in terms of paying for our infrastructure, before I might have been shocked by our page 33, our extraordinarily low $42 compared to anyone else. And I would say that you make a very good case for a sustainable rate. I like it that you tiered this in size, residence size. Commissioner White made the suggestions about and so I got to understand more the land use and those issues. The other thing is, I know that when we're kind of maybe thinking out this pattern, it might be something to be considering, not just retention ponds, which was interesting, but also wetlands. When people are so anxious to get rid of wetlands on their property, it's really something that benefits the all of us in our insurance rates throughout this county. We have lower insurance rates because of our wetlands, as I understand it, homeowners insurance. And, that might be some consideration that might be able to be built in some way. I just don't know. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. I'd also like to say that I'm very supportive of the tiered residential, of the full cost recovery, the increased level of service and maintenance, which just goes to what we're doing now. And I think, I'm willing to look at doing more, because I really think in terms of what we're looking at, it's probably something we need to really be thinking about. The sustainable capital funding is, I should just ask, I'm not sure, when you refer to that, is that by, well, I'll ask this. So right now we have a stormwater assessment that pays for half of it or something like that. And then we have general fund that pays for the other half or more.
Yes.
That pays. So when we're talking about, I would be very supportive of putting this all into a stormwater assessment. I think that's what the suggestion is here. And when we're talking about sustainable capital funding, we're also talking about including that in that stormwater assessment. Is that correct? Just so I can understand. I wasn't sure what it was. Okay. And my only other concern here, well, I have a lot of them, but I'll just name this one, is the pump stations, which, you know, I saw that they were maintained quarterly, and there's 36 of them in the county. And I remember during Hurricane Irma that one of the first kinds of issues that came up was many of the pump stations. I guess there's many more that are privately owned. You're just naming.
Those are only the stormwater pump stations, not sewage pump stations. Yes, we have those. We had some issues during Irma where we had power failures. Obviously, electric pumps didn't work. Part of this money that we would invest in these would be to set these up either for portable generators or permanent generators to support those things continuing to operate during power outages.
So so we're talking about both the stormwater, but the other thing that happened then was the wastewater
Yes.
pumps as well. And so that's a whole nother category that's not here listed in this.
Sure.
Because I know it was a big issue during Hurricane Irma. And at the time I remember, and so I'm just distinguishing these two various pump stations. But I knew that a lot of those pump stations, one of the problems was they hadn't been checked on in a long time. I'm not saying this as any kind of, I'm just understanding the protocol and the differences. But that some of the pump stations were apparently like overgrown and weren't prepared to operate on even generating power. The generators were broken. Some of them, I think, privately owned. And so I was trying to get at that with this and understand that distinction. And also, again, I'll go back to my old broken record to the extent that we can do solar on this stuff, and to the extent that now we might be able to do backup battery generation, you know, that where we wouldn't have to make sure that the generators were full and keep fueling them. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, I think the similarity and the distinction is that we're working closely with utilities to standardize our designs on pump stations. We actually use them for maintenance of the motors because they have a good electrical and mechanical shop. And I know, having come from the utility side as well, that, you know, we're looking at pretty much every pump station every week, if not more often. So somebody's visiting those, and I think they're very well maintained on our side. We did have generator issues, and we're trying to address that with, you know, power outages, those type of things. And so we're looking at every option, whether it's undergrounding, you know, permanent or portable generators, or additional pumping to do bypass pumping on that as well. Same situation on the stormwater side.
And one more question, just back to the fee assessment. So we would no longer be drawing on general fund. We would treat the stormwater like an enterprise fund and respectively be making it fund its own way.
Yes, that would be the goal.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Merman, you're recognized.
I'm exhausted listening to all that. Commissioner White, you're an engineer. You're not a pharmacist. I swear you're an engineer. But anyway, I just have a few questions. If you look at the map on 13, you can tell where all the demand is. District 1, a little bit, not a little bit, a lot in District 4. We probably keep your offices busy every single day. So I think you know from all the storms we've had where the flooding problems are in the county. And I just hope, after going through what we did with the city, because, you know, I live in the city, we went through all that stormwater debate and everything. A lot of residents were very opposed to those increases. I think what they do, 250 million, something like that. And then Charlie Miranda said that was just a drop in the bucket. That didn't solve their problem. They really needed $1 billion. So my question is, how will this money solve our problem, especially if we go the highest one? And how far are we in the ditch with having to repair everything? Like, I think, and Charlie Miranda was right, you have to look at this as the whole problem. You can't just do a Band-Aid going into it. And I've got areas in town and country, you know this. Apollo Beach now is emerging. The old infrastructure is starting to crack. Neighborhoods are flooding. I mean, I could go through every area of my district. And these people, their last always comments to me is, I pay my taxes, I want it fixed. So if they pay their taxes, they pay these fees, is it going to get fixed?
The answer is yes. The short answer.
Short answer.
The short
So
answer
does that
yes.
mean it's the
So-
Band-Aid or the,
No, ma'am. So the way we structured, we had, working with Henry and the engineers, we had a lot of discussion about really front-end loading this, spreading it out over a long time, and we got to a conclusion where this is a good balance between those. It's going to take time to ramp some projects up, so focus on maintenance and the emergency replacements while we're doing design work on the bigger projects. And then as we transition, this includes backlog of work. So we get caught up on the backlog, that frees up cash to either issue debt, to deliver those big projects as well. We're counting on grant money, and we've been successful in the past of getting grant money on the larger projects, more than that $1.5 million that's reflected just in last year's budget. So we believe we've got a good, solid, long-term plan in doing this. We definitely want to focus on getting those backlogs of bad pipes and ditch cleaning and maintenance items caught up within a 4, 5, 6 year period. I mean, we're going to have to bring some contract help on to do that, but we have every intention in doing that. And then continue to focus on those longer term projects and really get those implemented to make a difference.
okay, do you have a list that you can provide us of all these projects will help, that this will go towards, the funding will go towards?
Yes,
Do you-
ma'am. We have a list.
I would, if
It's
I
not
could
scheduled-
get a copy of that list, I'd
Sure.
really
It's
like
not
to see
scheduled or
it.
prioritized yet, but we definitely have a list.
Okay, so but you are going to prioritize it?
We will work through that process. We won't provide you the prioritized list this week or anything. We have
Right,
to,
right.
we have to
No,
have some money to
I
be able to
just want
start
see
that
the
process.
list.
Yeah.
I know you'll prioritize.
Sure.
I hear the comments about, making people pay more if they live in Zone A. I honestly, I think this room will be filled 5 times over with people that are opposed to that. And I get it, but because they're already paying an exorbitant amount in flood insurance, and now FEMA is getting ready to gouge them more with the new maps. In fact, they're extending it. Like the people in town and country, low income, they're now going to have to start paying these, and Ruskin, these exorbitant high flood insurance rates. So I feel, I don't think I could support it now. I'd have to see what you come back with, but I do think there would be really big opposition to that. And I'd like to see this go through very smoothly so we can really get these guys to work and help to fix all this. But I would be pretty concerned about doing something like that, though I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
I understand. I just, having lived. The other thing is, did you all consult with the city at all, how they went through their process of their stormwater Band-Aid fix? I have to say that because certain things are getting done, but they still have big problems.
Yeah, our staff had reached out to theirs and had some
They
conversations.
did?
Yes.
Okay, good. And new technology to repair. I know I've set up several meetings with you to, because there's a lot of technology out there
Yes.
to do repairs and maintenance. Not just quick fix, but good
Yes.
permanent fixes. Have you kind of worked this into the fee discussion?
Absolutely. So part of that pipe replacement, sometimes it's dig up and replace, tear the road up, go through that whole process. Other times it could be slip lining where we can push a pipe through from one end if it's a cross drain. And the third option on that is doing what they call cured in place, which is in situ form is a brand name, but you basically put a gel liner inside the pipe and inflate it with hot water, and it cures, and it basically forms inside the existing pipe. So we've used all those options as they do in the utilities department as well. And we'll continue to look at other options too, because there's cases where pipe joints may have gotten offset, and there's a way to inject foam underneath those to lift them and kind of seal the pipe. So yes, we are looking at all options.
Okay. Well, I'm going to be pretty supportive of this because it's fee increase day in Hillsborough County. And, but my district just cannot continue to keep calling you guys and crying and begging for fixes. We've got to have a holistic fix. And Commissioner White, you know this too. I mean, it's just exhausting, the time our staff have to spend on the phone with these people, answering their concerns, and we know we're constrained financially now, and I just want to get us to a good place as quick as possible. Thanks.
I just want to add one thing to that, because we recognize, so when they talk about, when he answers your question and said, is this going to take care of everything? There's always the but-for situation where
Right.
I think I mentioned in briefings, there are just those neighborhoods that I'm just going to say they probably never should have been allowed to build there.
Right.
What we're going to have to do is bring those to you on a case-by-case basis, because the cost and the dimension to fix those is just, it's beyond what they're talking about. And we're going to have to recommend, you're going to have to make a decision that we're going to spend that money, or we're not, or we're going to offer to buy up property. I don't know what the answer is, but so I just don't want anybody who's listening to think, okay, we're paying higher fees, and that means my neighborhood's going to get fixed. It may require a special solution. So
Okay, like I'll give you an example. Apollo Beach, we're really starting to get a lot of infrastructure. They're having a lot of infrastructure issues on stormwater. And it's because they crammed a lot of houses on those little fingers, and it's create a lot of demand. Pipes are wearing out. Those are older neighborhoods. And I'm just like wondering, will this go to help that, or are they not even on the list yet?
No, I think if it's a pipe issue, they're going to be on the list of infrastructure that needs to be fixed. I know in some of those older subdivisions, there's going to be challenges. Somebody put a pipe between two houses that runs from the street to the bay or the canal down there, and the houses are very close together, and nobody thought too much about how do you get a piece of equipment in there to fix it. So yes, we're looking at those. There's going to be some cases where there may not be an easement that we need to get, and so again, we work with the property owners to try to get to that solution.
We just have to be very careful in our land use when we're just packing these houses in. I know but we've got to allow enough space for infrastructure and for and putting the right infrastructure in there to answer the needs of the neighborhood. I'm really concerned about this moving forward.
So I would like to address that because I think Commissioner Overman also had a land use question. There's a lot of land use permeating in this conversation. Yesterday, in this event that a number of us attended, it was at the Center for Design at USF, where a group of students looked at really the impacts of sea level rise and really talked about the difference of the soils in Florida. And we are a sponge, and so we treat our stormwater differently. But one of the things that's coming out is this notion of just incorporating more natural approaches to treating stormwater combined with the technical and mechanical ones. And as we look at suburban areas, the more we can cluster development and leave larger spaces open, the more we have those opportunities. There is an opportunity as we think about parks and ball fields and everything else to start thinking about those as having a dual function. They can be a park when it's dry, but they're not going to be playing when it's raining and wet, and those can be some of those areas that are being used. So it's kind of rethinking this. As we move from suburban to a more urbanized environment, we start thinking about streets and alleys and those those kinds of things. There are ways to treat those not only just with swales, but impermeable spaces. What can we do to create something that, whether it's a landscape buffer or such, but we really are thinking differently now about those things that we just took as components or ingredients of a road. Now they're serving a dual purpose. But clustering is seeming on the suburban front to be that kind of thing that can really start to change the formula in land use. And of course, on the land use side too, as sea level rise continues to be an issue for us, really assessing whether or not the land use regulations will allow for how much of it do you want to continue to proliferate in those areas that are vulnerable. So there's a land use side that will travel with this as well.
I have one last, I'm sorry. So the Pasco runoff into Hillsborough, it's a huge problem. And is any of this going to help that? Build a wall? I think they already have walls around the property. That's the problem, is causing all this runoff.
So that's looking at some of those alternatives. It could be that we've got properties, we have some of those properties that we know we're familiar with up there that are in flood zones. And maybe the option is to not have those properties in flood zones, or at least the improvements. We have some environmental land up there that could potentially maybe be looked at to create something to capture some of that water. So I think, yes, those are things we definitely look at.
Okay, good, thank you.
Before I call in Commissioner Smith, you live on the Alafai? Don't you live on the Alafai?
Little Manatee.
Little Manatee, I'm sorry. I'm gonna ask some questions before you do that. You might start thinking. Mr. Lyons, you were good. You said that rainfall is in the month of August 2015. Remember the day?
Not exactly.
August 1st.
It went on for a couple of weeks.
August 1st.
actually.
You know how many inches we got by 3 o'clock? 3.1 inches.
Yeah.
In 6 days, you know how many feet we got? 2 feet.
Yes.
Now ask your questions. I think you want to ask a question.
Right, the Alafaya was particularly damaged in that storm.
I just looked that up. I don't
Yeah.
remember.
I understand what you're saying about some of these, some of our residents, and when we start making decisions about who should pay more or less here, we have to think a little bit big picture and make sure we understand what's happening. When I look at the slide number 13 and see all the red dots of the stormwater work requests, I mean, you can see that's it. They pretty much cover the county. The place where they're not so much is in that southeast corner, but that's where there's hardly any people. That's where the farmland is. So where the people are, that's where the problem is. It's Florida, folks. I mean, it's not, there's a perception whenever this conversation comes up, not just here, but in the newspaper or in other forums, that the problem is these McMansions on the beach are not paying their fair share, and that's what everybody else is paying for. That's not the only kinds of homeowners that are having flooding problems. And the reality is that there are a lot of retirees who moved to Florida decades ago into modular home communities, small homes on the rivers, in the low-lying areas, multi-generational family homes that have passed down since way before anybody ever thought about sea level rise, and the extra storms we're having now. And those people are suffering, and they're not, flooding, and they're not able to afford to move. Oh, their house was built in the wrong place 3 generations ago. Or, oh, their community was built in the wrong place when they retired to it on a fixed income 20 years ago. That's not their fault. And to start thinking about making them pay more than other people, I think is missing some of the big picture. The floodplains that we see where these flood requests are being made are not just on the bay and even on the rivers, but in low-lying areas far inland where, you know, the storm events, rain events, run off from higher ground and collect in their neighborhoods. And there's a point at which we are all responsible for each other, whether you've built in a floodplain or whether you live in a tornado zone or the fire zones out west. You can't just say, well, all those people should move out of those areas. There's hardly any area that isn't in danger of having a tree fall on your house in a windstorm. And so I just caution us all to be mindful that not to blame the victim here, and not to try to make some people pay more when it's not their fault, and not to even try to assign fault. This is Florida. We get hurricanes, we get flooding. If you're in California, you get fires. If you're in the Midwest, you get tornadoes. And we all have to help each other out. I agree and have long said that we do also need to provide for low-impact development is the term we used to use for talking about having more permeable surfaces, like you were saying, and like you were saying, Ms. Garces, to be smarter about as we put new development in. But the people who bought where we weren't so smart before, and are stuck there, it's not their fault that this county made those zoning decisions and allowed that to go on. Then we have long before anybody here. We have long had policies in the comprehensive plan in our coastal element that recommend and encourage lower densities in the coastal high hazard area. And boards before this have gone ahead and approved adding density, increasing density, notwithstanding those policies. So hopefully moving forward, we can keep these in mind, especially given today's higher risk of stormwater flooding and sea level rise, and begin to implement, actually rely on those policies in our comp plan and possibly strengthen them to stop increasing density there. And I think that's a very, very good idea. But I'm just want us all to remember the situations of everybody as we move forward. I do think it would be welcome to have higher fees, like is being suggested, in order to have higher protections. We either pay now or pay later in terms of as things get worse and worse. So I'm happy to see the suggestions for fees being raised in order that we can provide better service and protect the citizens from flooding as it becomes a worse and worse problem. Thank you.
Our last discussion before we move to the next steps from Mr. Merrill is Commissioner Overman, you recognize. Okay,
thank you, Chair. I was actually moving in August of 2015, my home and my business it took like the entire month of August. So my movers really thought that they needed a boat rather than a moving truck, because it was unbelievable how much it rained. And I'm starting to feel really old when we call the community down in Apollo Beach an older community, because I remember when they broke ground on that property. So I'm starting to feel kind of old on that. But to the question that we started to ask earlier, you know, I'm curious about what our percentage deficit in capital funding is for the existing infrastructure needs that we have now. You know, we have a 30-year infrastructure funding mechanism when it comes to roads, trails, you know, transit, safety, all that kind of stuff. And frequently when we're using and we're planning for that, to avoid resurfacing a road twice, I'm curious about, I know there's only so much planning capacity that one department can possibly tolerate, but where is there an opportunity to finance over 30 years this stormwater capital needs as we move forward with other capital needs that we can fund on our own with transportation?
So the good news is, before we pave a road, we go stick our heads in the pipes to make sure they're okay. And if they're not, we fix them before we pave the road.
Okay.
So that is taking place, and we're working with our utility department in those cases, or the city of Tampa in those cases, with their utilities to make sure that their pipes are fixed as well, so we aren't getting a washboard road after we spend a lot of money on the top. There's just, I believe, and we'll verify this, there's about a $60 million backlog of pipes that need to be replaced that's included in here. And that's within probably a five-year window to replace those.
60 billion?
60 million, I'm sorry.
Million, okay.
And then the more regional and intermediate type projects are in excess of $100 million. That would be our share on those. And so that's what we've kind of rolled in, and we'll provide a list of those projects. And we're counting on grant funds to fully fund those, and then additionally, we would look at finance on them. We believe that, the good thing is modern development doesn't create as many problems as older development and older issues that we have. The aged infrastructure is a big problem. And some of those intermediate projects, the bigger ones are in the town and country areas, an example. There's a lot of areas that we have tidal influence, and that sea level rise is going to be a piece of it as well. But the longer term delivery plan is to be able to exercise finance for those more expensive projects and pay them off over a period of time.
And the reason I bring that up, as I have mentioned in earlier workshops, we are in a very low interest rate market. Spreading out the cost is what every homeowner does to buy their home frequently. And we own the house right now, trying to figure out how to pay for it. And I am sensitive to raising the cost. One of the things that I looked at is, for the largest bulk of residential sizes is the medium range, which equates to, based on the sustainable rate, is $16 a month.
Yes.
So while I'm very concerned about our seniors that are on fixed income, and the ability of them to be able to sustain or to be able to make a lump sum payment if they own their home, there may be mechanisms we can put into place to finance the additional cost of these types of assessments. We do that with property taxes now, that our property appraiser is able to take a payment plan for paying for properties that aren't mortgaged, so they end up in part of your escrow. But I think it is important to recognize that $16 a month means something to someone, obviously, but having their home destroyed by flooding also does. So I think we somehow have to find the balance. But that's why I really, in looking about where all your red dots are, that overlaps our transportation, our school challenges, our septic tank challenges.
Yes.
So when we're looking at addressing the septic tank problem, at replacing our sidewalks and freshwater, stormwater resources, but also looking for ways to create greater resiliency from storms. If we have an arrangement with our utilities, our cable and our power providers in our area, to where there's opportunities, and we're going to be doing this work anyway, to bring those utilities underground so that they're safer and they're not as at risk of hurricanes, force winds, because that's what takes us out. The power's out, and it's out where we can't get to places and we can't communicate what's going on. Those are the things that I've when we're looking at this, if we have the capital to be able to do it quickly, given that we're going to have 30 years of transportation challenge, solution dollars to work with, it gives us an opportunity to actually do it, but it's going to require a lot of planning, a lot of man force, so that has to be put into the equation.
And we're considering that as part of the transportation program as well. We understand we may have to have a bigger footprint to underground those things, because
Yeah.
most things end up in the right-of-way.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merrill, next steps.
Yes, so if we are going to put these rates into effect in October of this year, then we would like to get direction from the board to move down the path of full cost recovery. If, however, we want to phase it in or take some other approach, we would need to know just generally at what direction you'd like to go, because the timeline shows that we would have to have a public hearing on August 7th in order to get the rates in effect. So we would need the time between now and then to bring back to you the formal rate structure to then set a public hearing in August. So there isn't really much time. But so what I'm saying is that if we did the full cost recovery this year, it would be implemented in October, and the higher rate would then be showing on their tax bills in November, right?
So yes, it would go out with the tax bill
In
in October.
November of this year, or October this
But
year.
what we have done in the past as well is we've set the ceiling
Mhm.
on the rate as part of the rate implementation through the public hearing,
Mhm.
and incremented the actual assessment over a period of time. So as an example, 2 years ago, we set the $42 rate as a ceiling and went from 30 to 36 to 42.
Mhm.
Commissioner Merriman, you recognize.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend to ask staff to move forward with the full
Full cost recovery.
full cost recovery, but I would like to see two options, just like we did this morning. I'd like to see a phased-in option, so we have flexibility. That's what I'd like to see, is some flexibility. And then the other is just to move forward with it going into effect right now.
Okay.
Commissioner White, you recognize.
Just so that I'm understanding this, on the residential side, you're talking about the board adopting the rates on slide 25, is that right?
$27.
Yes, I'm referring
No,
to
wait a
page
minute.
27.
Is that the one we want? No. That's sustainable.
Yeah,
That's
I think,
full cost, that's full cost recovery, additional capital, additional maintenance.
so when you say that to
27.
adopt the full cost recovery rate, that's the one on slide 25.
27.
So you're talking about the sustainable rate then?
Correct, right, yes. Which includes the full cost recovery and additional maintenance and additional capital. Is that right?
Well, that's a big,
Yes.
everybody knows that's a big jump. I mean, that's, for the large home, I mean, that's a sevenfold increase, give or take. It's,
Well, and that's why I asked for a phase-in.
yeah.
Okay.
I think Commissioner Merman and I are on the same wavelength here. Mr. Chairman, if I may, will staff have time to bring something back on the Orlando model so that we can at least take a look at it?
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk offline and see what it's going to take to do that, to really understand it better.
Okay.
I think we could, it's May 1st, maybe come back on the 15th with something on that. That may be pushing it a little bit,
Okay.
if not
Okay.
June 1st.
All right, we don't take any votes during workshops, but Commissioner Merman has made a suggestion, so I'm gonna do it this way. Is there any objection to any objection to Commissioner Merman's suggestion? Any objections? Without objection, okay. All right. Anything else, Mr. Merrill?
Nope, I don't think so. Thank you very much for listening for
My-
a long day.
My closing remarks is that we pray for one of these Ninos, I don't know which Nino it is, that, that we don't get a lot of rain this coming year, that we don't get another August 1st, 2015, or some more hurricanes. But having said that, they're watching a disturbance right now in the Caribbean, and this is a month before hurricane season. So let's just make sure we are on board of what we have to do to make sure we can make these accomplishments through the years to come. Having said that, we'll adjourn.